Milk, outside a bag of milk, outside a bag of milk, outside a bag of milk. So immediately upon starting the game, I was confronted with shadow people, something that I'm quite familiar with, and I'm sure many other people who have suffered through psychosis or anybody who's ever had hallucinations before or fever dreams can confirm that shadow people are real. I don't care, they're real. What I'm saying is that they're common hallucinations. And so her seeing like shadow people, I think she said whimsically dancing and that she could get caught up in the dance for a certain amount of hours. Her seeing shadow people in her hallway, very common occurrence. I was not surprised that this game showed that immediately because the last game was pretty accurate, so I expected it to just be even more accurate. I expected this game to double down on the accuracy, which it did. Now, one thing that I will say is that she seems to lean into repetitive thoughts of lying to herself about realities. So she said, I'm almost positive there's never been a corpse in my kitchen. I'm absolutely positive there's never been a corpse in my kitchen. Haha, that'd be so silly. I'm positive there's never been a corpse in my kitchen. Okay, I'm starting to think they had a corpse in their kitchen, you guys. She repeats it like 3-4 times, right? And like it tells me that definitely there's been a corpse in her kitchen. I believe it was her father, and I believe her mom killed her father, which is even darker. But it's a little complex. I think both of her parents were pretty abusive. They may or may not have been divorced. I'm not sure. She does say her mom and dad lived together, but her dad's gone now, and I think she's really denying that traumatic event. In fact, if you play the first game, you find out that I think her dad jumped out a window, but I think her mom actually pushed him out the window, and it might have been because he was abusive towards the daughter. Can't really tell. Dad dragged me out of the school building while I was scratching and biting. The teachers didn't interfere. That scene was ordinary for them. Who knows what that little brat has done? Then he pushed me into the car and we drove home in complete silence. Okay, back to the repetitive thoughts. So there have been traumatic events in my life that I've wanted to convince myself didn't really happen. So telling myself that didn't really happen, or trying to cleverly rewrite the story so that it happened a different way, a more pleasant way, are both things that I've tried coping mechanism wise, and they don't really work. Your bad memories will surface, they'll come back. Another thing, personifying and humanizing inanimate objects. Have you guys met Pinky? Jokes aside, personifying stuffed animals, personifying inanimate objects, feeling sorry for those personifications, like how she feels sorry for the milk, how she says she took it out of the safest place because no one would drink the milk in the store, and so now it's in danger of being drunk. So she, of course, she busts into her kitchen and drinks it. And reminder, I'm pretty sure she's allergic to milk. So she seems to be extremely suicidal. When you go into her room later, you will find stacks of boxes of milk in the corner underneath her sink, basically letting you know that she does this all the time, drinking milk and then having her mom have to inject her with the anti-allergic medicine. I'm not struggling. I know it's useless. I just stay silent and endure its tight grip that stops me from moving. And it's interesting that she views her mom as a beast. The moment it says that, the claw pierces my arm. I don't feel anything other than my barely discernible crawling under my skin and the ring of tightly sprung sinews. But then the claw injects its venom into me. It hurts! I feel my blood boiling up. Strong shivers run through my body, paralyzing every single cell, while my veins and arteries heat up, almost bursting from that pressure. I try screaming, but instead of producing words, I vomit thick, milky foam. At the end of this sequence, I believe that she says something along the lines of her only bringing others trouble. A very relatable thought that very many mentally ill people and non-mentally ill people probably think. You have to depend on someone else a lot of times if you have a really fucked up, severe mental disorder that impacts your ability to live life. Like me, I have to depend on Josh financially because working is just not an option for me right now. One thing that bothered me is that it seems like her mom is abusive and tried to kill her after finding out that she was drinking milk. And I had to rack my brain about this. Why would you choke your child and try to kill her? Her child even screamed, kill me, as she's strangling her. And I realized maybe she doesn't really care about the daughter dying. She cares about what it would look like. Maybe she cares that it would look like she poisoned her or something like that, especially since the dad's already out of the picture. This doesn't seem like the right way to get your kid to stop, consuming a poisonous product. Also, why would you send her to the store to buy it if she's lactose intolerant? I don't know. I just can't see a reason why you would abuse your kid after they tried to kill themselves. Wouldn't you try to be kind to them? Right? I don't get it. One part of the story that I really want to focus on because it really impacted me was the relationship that Milk-chan has with the voice. This voice in her head plays as a conversation partner. It's somebody who comforts her. It's basically a nice parent that isn't abusive, but since both of her real parents are abusive, she still imagines this voice to be a little snarky and a little assholish at times, but at the end of the day, this voice just seems to be trying to help her. You play the role of that voice, by the way. And unlike in the first game, you don't get too many choices between how you talk to her. Most of your choices seem to be different ways to say things. But for the most part, you are just trying to help her. You tell her to take her meds when she invented excuses not to take them. You tell her to lay down and go to sleep. You help her collect her thoughts. You try to keep her on track. I mean, there's a time when, in the beginning, when you first start talking to her, she says, "Go away, I don't need you, I can do things on my own." What a bully. I mean, I didn't mean to be, I'm sorry. Actually, why am I even worried about this? In reality, I don't need you at all. I've said this before, too. A relatable thought. I've told a voice in my head, the one that anchors me and tries to help me to fuck off and that I don't need him, but I did at the end of the day, because you get so used to these things that you almost start to live with them, and having them being taken away from you can be very devastating. I remember a story about a woman who heard voices that started taking meds, and she stopped taking meds because she couldn't live without the constant narration. She couldn't live without the voice saying she opens the door, she walks down the hallway, she goes to check her mail. That was something she had gotten used to, and taking meds took it away from her. I know, very wild, but when you start doing a lot of research on different cases of schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, you start to find out a lot of very interesting things that the public just doesn't think about these disorders. So this voice in my head has become such a frequent occurrence, and he's been around since I was a child. Obviously, I've given him a gender, I've given him a name, and that's not very common with other voices. Like I said, other voices, sometimes they have very familiar voices that I hear all the time, but they're mostly just rude, mean, annoying. They're not exactly my friends. There's a couple who seem pretty they just seem like to represent all of my fears and things like that, my anxieties and things like that. So they just harp on and on and on about these things. And I remember watching a video with a woman. Her name is Eleanor Longden. She did a TED Talk. And if you're interested, you should Google it and look it up. It's such a good TED Talk. But she has schizophrenia. And she talked about how the voices in her head were representative of her anxieties and fears, and that if you start questioning them about the things they're saying, you will find that that's all they are. And the example she used is a voice telling her not to leave the house. Well, that's just reinforcing her anxieties and her fear of going outside the house and being watched and recorded and being harassed and stalked and whatever, right? And if you start questioning the voices on those things, they don't really have logical answers for them because they're just your fears, right? And another thing, one thing I can relate this to is my fear of weight gain. And so my brain will tell me reasons not to eat certain foods. Oh, don't eat this because it's poisoned. Okay, but it's telling me that because I'm scared of gaining weight. I'm scared of being fat, basically. And so, it's like if you eat that cake, it's the government poisoning you. Somebody spit in the batter. You don't want to eat somebody's spit, right? Things like that. Okay, the voice that I'm talking about is nothing like that. It's just, he's very much like the voice that you see in the Milk game. Just very much like, hey, do your homework. Hey, you need to go do this. You need to go wash you need to go take a shower. You need to go brush your teeth, wash your hair, do this, blah, 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 blah. You need to make sure, and if I'm in a bitchy mood and I pick a fight with Josh, he'll be like, hey, you're picking a fight. You need to stop doing that. Things like that, It's really helpful rather than harmful. So this wouldn't be an analysis of Milk 2. I'm just going to call it Milk 2, all right? If I didn't talk about the scene with Tresca. And there's a lot to unpack here, so get strapped in. So first of all, the scene that plays out with Tresca is basically the events of the first game. And I realized that she's personifying a character to play herself. Interestingly enough, it's a male character, and the voice in my head that I basically have personified, the one that's basically Volition from Disco Elysium, he's male. Now, I don't know if that makes a difference, but it did just make it slightly more relatable. But I cannot reiterate to you enough that seeing an imaginary version of myself that's of the opposite gender playing out the actions that happened to me yesterday is like, what the fuck? Why is this happening? Right? And at first I was confused. I was like, who is Tresca? Who is this boy? But then when you go to the store to get the milk, you realize you're playing the role. Well, the character is now playing the role of a mother with her son. And in the game, one of the people behind the counter just calls the kid the R word, just straight up. And it's just like, bro, that's considered a slur these days. And at the time that this game came out, it was considered a slur. So I think they were trying to make a point that this is how they've been treated for having different behavior out in public. the part of the question nor the reply he gets. But my good-for-nothing friend freezes in place, looking the customer straight in the eye. I hurry toward them. Is he yours? The customer talks to me. He speaks with disgust while wearing a scornful expression. Wow. You're seeing it, her dreaming it as her being a mother with a little boy going to the store. Now, I'm not sure how to think of this, okay? I'm not sure why she's dreaming it that way. Maybe it's because your dreams are just strange. But she woke up and started crying, and I'm sure there's more endings to this. But on top of that, she also talks about something else that I'm going to have to get into. But I really need to talk about this Tresca part because it unsettled me. Because, again, I've had this thought process before where I think about things that happened to me yesterday, things that I did the day before, from the perspective of a different person, but a made-up person in my head. It was just kind of like, these games are pretty mind-blowing when you actually have a disorder, like the ones that they're similar to whatever they're basing. Like, the character obviously has a diagnosis, okay? And when you have a diagnosis that's similar to it, or she has a couple of diagnoses, actually. And when you have a diagnosis that's similar to this character, the accuracy is mind-blowing. It is too much. It is like, whoa, it's almost triggering. The part that affected me the most, that brought tears to my eyes, was probably when she starts talking about the internet, and then she goes outside and you get more, of her perspective. Because basically she met somebody online who sent an army of trolls after her. And those trolls they were just bots, I guess. She opened up to this guy. I think they were in a relationship, and he turned on her and just sent a bunch of trolls and people after her after she opened up about, like, whatever. I'm guessing she told him about her disorders, or maybe she told him, I don't know, just the things she goes through. And a lot of people will use anything that you've gone through against you. I used to have a friend online that I was, at some point, she and I thought about dating. And she used every single personal thing that I ever told her against me, down to my childhood trauma, okay? This is the type of person that I think Milk-chan was talking to. Someone who pretends to like you, pretends to care, gathers information about you, and then throws all that information back at you to abuse you. And this person I'm talking about was trying to mentally harm me. They even admitted to it later. Someone who convinces you to tell them everything and then just fucks you over, sends an army of bots after you to trigger you and to make fun of you. And now she won't even get on the computer, and she thinks that everybody online is fake. And I'm like, shit, I believe in dead internet theory somewhat. And so it's not even inaccurate of a depiction when someone goes through something like that and they already suffer from these types of symptoms. Of course, they're just going to shut that thing out of their life and completely not want to get involved. You know what I mean? Like, she said she had a few hundred friends, and imagine all those friends turning on you at some point. Imagine somebody sending an army of bots to make fun of you for some of the worst things that have ever happened to you in your life. So, my afterthoughts. I think this game did an extremely good job at depicting some of the symptoms that I experience and that I'm sure many other people experience. It's almost therapeutic in a way. It might be triggering sometimes, but it is almost therapeutic to see these things in a game and to realize you're not alone and to know that someone else has gone through this stuff and to know that it's not all bad. I mean, it's the same feeling I have with Evangelion, right? You can tell that the person who wrote NGE suffered immensely, right? But they made this great piece of art from it. So it's like, okay, that suffering might mean something. I can do something with that suffering. There's nothing worse in this world than thinking that all of your suffering and your pain was meaningless. Believe me, I know. And when I look at this Milk game, I think this creator took their suffering and they put it into a game that somebody could play and feel something. A beautiful piece of art, really. And for someone like me, it helped. It helped. I don't know how to explain how it helped, but it did help playing through this game, playing through the first and the second game back to back, and just, I don't know, seeing my symptoms in a game made me feel like, okay, so I'm not alone. Basically, I think you should play these two games. They're really cheap. I think the first game is free, and the second game is like $8.99, and I just think you guys should play them. They're amazing games. Thanks for watching.